Hi, I hope everybody had a great Mother's Day weekend. I did. I enjoyed visiting, Zooming or Facebooking, and then briefly visiting the kids that my grandkids and my children that are here with me here on Haida Gwaii. I'm going to continue weaving the rigid weft uh, row that I've been doing, and I'm going to also read a Raven's traveling book, or from this book. The stories are collected by John R. Swanton and edited and translated by John Enrico. So I think the ship program down in Skidegate is who had that published. I would like to say that the story, it sounds like it's a story that is done on, it happens on the mainland because it involves a beaver, and Haida Gwaii doesn't have beaver here naturally. They did later bring the beavers here, but anciently we've never had beaver. We didn't even have deer here on our island, and that was brought in also. So that is why I say the story happened on the mainland, but it's a Haida story that we've passed down through our families. So I hope you enjoy the story that I've chosen to read from that book, and it's just another way that we talk about the origins of things. And so I'm going to start reading on page 23 of that book, Raven Who Kept Walking. After that, when he had walked along for a while, he sat down at the spot where a trail came out. When he had sat there crying for some while, some people carrying gambling stick bags on their backs and sprinkled with down came up and questioned him. "My mother and my father have just died. I am walking around in search of you because they said of me that my father's lineage was your father's lineage." Then they had him leave with them. What should they come to lying there? They had him sit. One of the men went around the back of the screen. After he had been gone a while, he returned, and the lower parts of his legs were wet. He brought out a salmon that he had just broken the neck of. They rubbed together some quartz pebbles, and the fire began to burn. They sliced the salmon in front of the fire. They put in rocks to heat and boil the salmon broth with hot rocks, and when it was cooked, they sat him in the middle. They ate it there. These were the beavers, they say. They had left to gamble, but it said they returned on account of him. Then someone went to the wall behind the screen again. He brought out a tray of high bush cranberries, and they ate that too. The same person went to the wall again. He brought out the innards of a mountain sheep, and they cut them into 4 parts. They made Raven's big part big, and they said to him, "Don't leave. You'll stay with us from now on." Then they grabbed their gambling stick bags, put them on their backs, and went off. They returned when it was almost getting dark. He was still sitting where he had been sitting. Then someone went to the wall again. He brought out a salmon again. They boiled it. Then someone brought out high bush cranberries too, and he brought out mountain sheep innards. And when they had finished eating, they went to bed. Early the next morning, after they had eaten the 3 courses, they grabbed their gambling stick bags again, put them on their backs, and left. Then Raven went behind the screen. What should be laying there but a lake? The salmon trap sat in the stream flowing out of it. The trap was going like someone who was shivering. The salmon in it were so many. Little canoes were passing each other going around on the lake. The points were red with high bush cranberries. Lynn, the woman's song, rolled across the water. Then he pulled out the trap, folded it together, and put it by the edge of the lake. Then he rolled the lake up with it, together with the house, and he put it under his arm. He pulled himself up into the tree. Standing there, it wasn't heavy for him. Then he came down, unrolled it, and lit the fire again, ran behind the screen, brought out a salmon, and cooked it immediately. He ate it right away and put out the fire again. Then, as he sat by the fire, he cried and cried. The beavers came in while he had not yet wiped away his tears. "Say, why are you crying?" "I'm crying because the fire went out." Then they spoke together. "And it just goes that way," they said to him. They lit the fire, and after one of them went to the wall, he brought out a salmon, and they sliced it in chunks, and that still hung together. Boiled it and ate it, and after they had eaten high bush cranberries and mountain sheep innards, they went to bed. Early the next day, when they had eaten the 3 courses again, they grabbed their gambling stick bags again and put them on their backs and went off. Immediately Raven ran to the wall. He brought out a salmon, cooked it, and ate it, together with the high bush cranberries and mountain sheep innards. And then he went to the wall and pulled out the trap. He folded it together along with the house. He put it on the edge of the lake, rolled the lake up with it, and put them under his arm. Then he pulled himself up into a tree that stood at the edge of the lake. He sat halfway up. After he had sat there for a while, someone came up from the beach. Their house and lake were gone. After the beaver had looked around at where they had been, he glanced up. What do you know? Raven was sitting up there with his stuff. Then the beaver went down to the beach, and 2 of them came up. They came at the tree together and gnawed away at it, and when it began to fall, Raven quickly moved across to another one. And when it too started to fall, he sat with the stuff in one standing next to it. When he had gone up many trees ahead of them, they gave up. The beavers wandered around, they say. After they had walked around with no place to go for a while, it is said that they found a lake and settled in it. After Raven had wandered around up in the mainland interior for a while, a big muskeg was laying there. They say he unrolled the lake there. All at once it was lying there. He didn't let go of the trap and the house, however. He did that, kept them, they say, because he wanted to teach the mainland people and the island people about them. Then after he had walked along the edge of the water for a while, a woman-like thing appeared half out of the water at the mouth of Bitnik Arm. Looking at her made him want her, and he made a canoe and went to her. When he got close to her, she disappeared into the water ahead of him. And then he made a canoe of something else and started out to her again. And when he got near her, she disappeared underwater. Then he fixed something else again. She disappeared underwater ahead of him again. Then he searched along the edge of the grass for a while, and he spread apart a pod of the giant vetch with sticks. He started out to her aboard this, and then he got near her. She didn't disappear. And when he reached her side, he got her aboard. She wore a dancing apron and leggings. He landed and untied the apron and leggings, so they fell from her and wiped her all over. And then he ran up in the woods and put a marmot skin robe on her shoulders. Then he put the canoe into the water, put her aboard, and they left for the islands, they say. He had her get off at Raruguns, which the note says is a campsite at Pallet Creek at the head of Kumshua Inlet. That place that they talk of had been destroyed in a logging operation now, though. So he put down the house for her, but he still held the trap under his arm. He kept it because he wanted to teach her about it, they say. Then he went back across. When he had traveled about by canoe on the mainland side for a while, what do you know? Someone was traveling by himself on a canoe, they say. The end. What I especially like about this one is that the raven actually rolls up a lake, and he puts it under his wing. And in some stories, he flies off with that rolled up lake and flies around the mainland and then comes over to Haida Gwaii and drops droplets of that lake and creates the different streams and the different lakes and water areas in those two places, the mainland and Haida Gwaii. So I really like the raven and the beaver story. And like I say, it's probably took place in the mainland. But in my family, the Raven's traveling stories start at the up at the Nass River, so it makes sense to me that there would be the beaver, and sometimes you'll see in our Haida stories porcupines, and so the Raven traveled all over the place, and he created many things. I'm going to read from the Tlingit Myths and Texts collected by John R. Swanton. And the Tlinkits also had Raven traveling stories. And one really famous one is about how Raven gets the box of daylight and releases the sun, the moon, and the stars. Raven thought over all kinds of plans for getting this light into the world, and finally he hit on a good one. The rich man living there had a daughter, and he thought, I will make myself very small and drop into the water in form of a small piece of dirt. The girl swallowed this dirt and became pregnant. When her time was completed, they made a hole for her, as was customary, and they lined it with rich furs, but the child did not wish to be born on those fine things. Then its grandfather said, What do you think it would be best to put into that hole? Shall we put in moss? So they put moss inside, and the baby was born on it. Its eyes were very bright and moved about rapidly. Round bundles of varying shapes and sizes hung about on the walls of the house. When the child became a little larger, it crawled around back of the people, weeping continually, and as it cried, it pointed to the bundles. This lasted many days. Then its grandfather said, Give my grandchild what he is crying for. Give him that one hanging on the end. That is the bag of stars. So the child played with this, rolling it about on the floor back of the people, until suddenly it let it go and threw the smoke hole. It went straight up into the sky, and the stars scattered out of it, arranging themselves as you now see them. That was what he went there for. Some time after this, he began crying again, and he cried so much that it was thought he would die. Then his grandfather said, Untie the next one and give it to him. He played and played with it around behind his mother, and after a while he let that go up through the smoke hole also, and there was the big moon. Now just one thing more remained, the box that held the daylight, and he cried for that. His eyes turned round and showed different colors, and the people began thinking that he must be something other than an ordinary baby. But it always happened that a grandfather loves his grandchild, just as he does his own daughter. So the grandfather said, Untie that last thing and give it to him. His grandfather felt very sad when he gave this to him. And when the child had this in his hands, he uttered the raven cry, Caw, and flew out with it through the smoke hole. Then the person from whom he had stolen it said, That old raven has gotten all my things. Journeying on, Raven was told of another place where a man had everlasting spring of water. So then in that story, Raven takes the water. I want to read one more place where I really think it's interesting about where he drops that water. This happened somewhere about the Nass, and afterwards he started on this way. First he let some water fall from his mouth and made the Nass. By and by he spit more and more out and made the Stikine. Next he spit out Taku River, then Chilkat, then Alsek, and all the other large rivers. The small drops that came out of his mouth made the small salmon creeks. I hope you enjoyed those stories. I'd like to know if people are ready to start the lessons of the Nahin. I'm soon going to be in that shield shape, and it'd be good for me to know how many people are ready. So if you have been hanging a project and you do want to go along with the Nahin demonstrations and instructions, then let me know if you're ready.